I'm done. I can't do this. I quit. Backpacking can be hard, especially if you don't have years of experience like I do, but if you know where the pitfalls are, they are easier to avoid. I'm going to share 5 mistakes that I've made and still sometimes make to this day, and what I've learned so that I can help you avoid making those mistakes for yourself. The first mistake I want to share is not being prepared for a freak accident on trail. This mistake could be the difference between life and death. Luckily, I haven't had anything go sideways while on trail, but I've definitely gone out backpacking without being fully prepared for unexpected circumstances. And there's 3 things that I recommend doing in order to be prepared for a freak accident. The first one is having a get out plan. So always know where your best routes are in order to get off trail. Sometimes it's going to be just finishing the trail, but other times, like on the trip that I'm on right now, there are a couple roads that come close to the trail that have little side trails that come to the main one. And we know that if we needed to bail out, we could just bail out to those roads and hopefully get to safety really quick. Make sure you're looking at a map of the area before you head out on trail and make sure that you know where all those get out routes are. The second thing is making sure you have a first aid kit and that you know how to use it. While this won't necessarily be life or death, it can make you a lot more comfortable on trail. For instance, if you get a blister, you can treat that blister, pop it, throw some Leukotape on it, or put some Leukotape on the hot spot before you even get a blister. A first aid kit is going to be really good for preventative care as well as treating those minor things that may make you need to get off trail if you weren't able to treat them. I recommend taking a basic first aid kit. It's going to help you be able to use all the tools at your disposal. But if you really want to deep dive into first aid, especially as it relates to the wilderness, then I recommend taking a 20, 40, or 80-hour wilderness first aid course. The third thing is having some sort of satellite communication and SOS device. You can use the satellite communication feature in order to communicate with people that might be in town or who are your emergency contacts. So if you do have to bail out on your emergency bailout route, then maybe they can come pick you up so you're not having to walk out down a road, or they can provide you some advice on weather or other things that may be really important while you're out on trail. And worst case scenario, you press the SOS button and hopefully you live in an area that has really good search and rescue and they'll send a helicopter and come and get you. But just know that that's not always the case. A lot of places it's going to be the local sheriff or sometimes people who don't have a lot of search and rescue experience. And I know scenarios where even though people have pressed the SOS button, search and rescue wasn't able to get to them because it was just unsafe to get to their location and they've ended up dying. So don't put yourself in a scenario where you are having to call for search and rescue. Try to avoid that at all costs. But if you do, having that SOS can be really useful and could save your life. The second mistake is underestimating how much terrain and elevation factors into the difficulty of a trail. This has happened to me where I've planned a trip that was very short distance, 10 kilometers, and I thought I was gonna be able to get to my campsite very easily, no problem. But then once I got on trail, I realized that the trail was not very well maintained and it was a lot steeper than I thought it was. Coupled with that, along the trail, there was not a lot of good places to camp. So I was hiking and hiking and hiking, trying to look for a campsite as it started getting dark. And I finally made it to a spot when it was dark. And that's not the scenario that you want to be in. You want to be able to have a plan and execute it and not having to use these backup scenarios that may not actually turn out to be feasible. In order to avoid this mistake, I recommend using different apps in order to plan your trip. My personal favorite for planning a trip and seeing what the elevation changes is Gaia, but AllTrails is also a good option. It's going to give you that elevation information, but what's also super useful is that each trail has reviews, so you can take a look and get an indication from other people as to how difficult the trail is. And if you see a trail that doesn't have any comments or reviews on it, then it might not be a very busy trail and might actually be very difficult to walk down because it's not maintained and doesn't see a lot of foot traffic. Some other options for apps that I've had friends recommend are Natural Atlas and Onyx. The third mistake is suffering uncomfortably, especially when it comes to my pack as well as my sleep system. When I first started backpacking, I was using a very poorly fitted pack, and it wasn't until I went to a store, got my torso measured and a pack fitted that I was feeling a lot more comfortable on trail. When you have a well-fitted pack, it just carries the weight a lot better and you're not as sore and uncomfortable throughout the day and at the end of the day. For a sleep system, those of you who watch the channel, you guys know that I started off sleeping on a 3/4 length, 1-inch foam sleeping pad. That thing was super uncomfortable. I'd stuff my clothes into a stuff sack to use as a pillow, and then I had a really thin blanket that had me feeling really cold every night that I went out. These days, I'm sleeping on thick, inflatable mattresses that are super comfortable. I have an entire video about the most comfortable mattresses out there, but a couple of my favorite comfort options are the Etherlite XT from Sea to Summit, as well as the REI Helix sleeping pad. For pillows, I have a couple recommendations. If you want a lightweight option, then the Trekology 2.0 is a great pillow. If you want one that's going to be similar to at home, a really big pillow, then the XPED Mega Pillow is gigantic. It's going to fit the entire width of a 25-inch wide sleeping pad, and that can be super comfortable for some people. And then if you want a thick foam topper on top of your pillow, then the Nemo Philo is a good option. Don't underestimate comfort while on trail. I think being uncomfortable is probably the #1 reason why people don't continue with backpacking once they kind of dabble in a little bit. So making sure you're comfortable right from the start is going to make a big difference for you. The fourth mistake is forgetting things. I've forgotten tons of things on the trail. I'm embarrassed to say I've forgotten tent stakes for my tent. I've almost forgotten shoes while I'm going on a trip that I've had to fly to. And I've forgotten pillows. I've forgotten things, nothing that's super critical yet, but things that just make backpacking a lot more uncomfortable and a little bit more difficult. In order to help myself not forget things, I've started using checklists a lot more often. I'll have a list of all the kind of general things I need for a backpacking trip, as well as some optional things. Things like this Helinox chair that I have behind me, as well as camp slippers, camp sandals. I just make sure that I have everything on this checklist, and then I check it as I'm packing, and then I check it kind of in my mind what I packed right before I leave for the trip. A super useful tool that I've been developing with someone else is a website called PackWizard. Through PackWizard, you can make gear lists of all of your gear and then turn that gear list into a checklist. It adds little check boxes next to each item, so as you're packing, you can just check each item off and then make sure that you have everything that you need for your trip. PackWizard also allows you to print off your checklist or save it as a PDF, so that if you want to have it all the time or have it at the trailhead where you may not have cell phone reception, then it will be useful for that as well. Usually I just have a generic checklist I've put together on PackWizard, things like tent, sleeping pad, shoes, and I'll have a link in the video description to that generic checklist so you guys can use it for yourselves before you go on a trip so you're not forgetting anything. The fifth mistake is spending too much money right off the bat. I know I talked about gear a lot, but if you're just getting into backpacking, I highly recommend renting or borrowing gear. It's going to allow you to kind of see what you like, see what kind of features you like in different pieces of gear, test it out, and then when you are ready, you can go and buy a piece of gear that is going to more likely be right for you. This is a big one and definitely a mistake that I made. When I first started backpacking, I just went to Mountain Equipment Co-op, which is the REI of Canada, and I bought all of my gear brand new without really knowing what I needed or what I wanted. And that was kind of a mistake. I've since replaced all of that gear. There's only a couple items that I may still use, but I probably wasted a bunch of money that I didn't need to. If you are ready to buy gear, then go check out my beginner backpacking gear list. It has a ton of really solid yet affordable gear that's going to help you backpack for years to come, if not decades.